Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, or shall I say mini workshop. I am so excited for this one today. I am Susan Ryan, the Senior Director for the Greenhouse Project. And this topic to me is one that is really near and dear to my heart. But I see some of you have already kind of gotten the memo and you're introducing yourself in the chat box. And that's what I'd like to do. You know, I think if there's one thing I've learned in Zoom, how important it is to try to create that sense of community and understand who's in the virtual room with us for today's session. So please take some time and introduce yourself in the chat room. Your name, the organization you're with would be great. Just to let you know, this session is being recorded and you will get a copy of the recording as well as the slides that were used and additional resources, and expect to receive that at some point tomorrow. So again, really, really excited that you are joining us today. So let me set the stage a little bit and tell you why I feel such excitement about this. I will tell you that in March of next year, it'll be 14 years that I've been a part of the Greenhouse Project. And my first week on the job in 2008, I got introduced to the PHI coaching approach. And I can tell you that as a former director of nursing, as somebody who's worked in the field for a really long time, the coaching approach and the coaching methodology really helped to shape me incredibly. And I think it has so much for the reasons why we're here. And so our agenda today, really thinking about what we want to do, is to really, let's face it, we're all experiencing incredible workforce challenges. I can't read anything, and not just our industry, but certainly it's impacting our industry in a peculiar way. And so we're going to unpack the challenges, take a look at some of the data. We're going to look at coaching as a solution. And let's face it, there's not a singular solution, a silver bullet that will really solve all of the challenges that we're experiencing right now. But let's really take a look at the Greenhouse Project's coaching approach. Since the inception, I mentioned the PHI coaching approach. The Greenhouse Project has really owned it, taken it to new places, and Marla and Mary today are going to unpack it a bit more. I think what's important when this was being conceived is that we wanted you to be able to walk away with some takeaway strategies so that what you hear today, you'd be able to apply readily to your workforce environment. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So next slide, we'll talk a little bit about continuing education. And if you need nursing credits or administrator NAP credits, it has been approved for 1.25 credits. And in order for you to receive those credits, it's important that you stay with us the entire duration. The speakers acknowledge they do not have any conflicts of interest in presenting this material. So really excited that we can offer you some continuing education associated with this. So let's take the slides down, and I'd love to do a couple polls. And the first poll, we're going to try to understand why you're here. I told you my excitement for this, but what prompted you when you saw the title, when you saw the session? What prompted you to register for this? So I will give you just a few seconds to kind of answer which ones. And it is multiple choice. So maybe it was not a singular answer for you, singular reason, but why did you decide to attend this session? So thanks so much for participating. All right, Janet, let's see what people have said. All right, well, let's see. Number one is I'm interested in how coaching might benefit our organization. I'm interested in building my own coaching skills. I guess that would be the number one. I'm curious about greenhouse training, desperate for solutions for workforce challenges. And I'm experienced in coaching and eager to learn more. That's awesome. Well, I am so thankful that you have chosen to spend the next 75 minutes with us. So let's launch another poll. It sounds like some of you have some coaching knowledge already. You want to build upon it. Some of you, maybe not so much. So let's just kind of see where everybody is. This is a pre-assessment. And so I'd love for you to complete this. And we've got a couple questions here. Please assess your knowledge and understanding of coaching skills. It is a single choice. That's the first one. And assess your ability to create a collaborative coaching culture. The second question. So thank you for taking some time to answer those. And we won't be sharing these results, but it's important as we think about further opportunities. It's kind of nice to know where everybody is, and we will do a post-assessment at the end, and hoping that will have been able to give you some skills. All right, Janet, you can close those polls. So thank you everyone for participating in those polls. So let's go back to the slides, and I'd love to introduce our presenters for today. And really excited to introduce both of them. I call them my colleagues, esteemed colleagues, but they've really become friends, and I admire what both of them do. I met Mary Hoffner Thomas, who is our education coach, years ago when we were doing our graduate program at the Erickson School on Aging. And just meeting Mary, working together with her on projects, I knew she needed to become a part of the team. And so I recruited Mary, and she has been with our team for 10 years. And Mary has supported the project management process and really working with organizations that are adopting the greenhouse model. And most recently, she has really supported Marla in all of the educational efforts that are supporting our projects. And she is our education coach. And the other part of that dynamic duo is Marla DeVries. And I remember meeting Marla years ago in my tenure with Greenhouse, and everybody said, Marla's somebody that you really need to bring on board because she's got so much rich experience. And from a culture change education perspective, she's really the person. Marla approaches this through the lens of being a former ombudsman and recognizing the vital role that culture really plays in helping to shape those respectable environments. And so she has cut her teeth and so fully steeped in culture change broadly, but really thinking about from an educational perspective, what we need to do to create learning environments and what we need to really think about from a coaching collaborative culture. She has embraced the coaching approach and is really taking it to new heights. She is the Chief Learning Officer for the Greenhouse Project and continues to help us really think about what do we need to do externally to really help support organizations across the country, and I would say even beyond, as well as, internally what we need to do. So with that, I am going to turn today's presentation initially over to Mary, who's going to unpack some of the challenges. So Mary, it's all yours.
Thank you, Susan. And it brings back memories like, oh yeah, going back to school, goodness gracious. So to really start this off and to really set the stage, we're going to briefly look at what the data has told us about really identifying the challenges that we're all facing. So back in October, the Washington Post had done a story, an article. It talked about a record number of workers are quitting their jobs. And within that, it talked about 4.3 million people quit their jobs in August. And that is nearly 3% of the workforce. And that was according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So a pretty amazing number. So the number of people, they said in that article, quitting their jobs has surged to record highs, and it's really pushed by a combination of factors that people are sensing that opportunity for something better, better pay, a better position. And the pandemic has also jolted workers into really their mindset about what their job is, and then their lives too. So it's made a major change. So much so that the numbers are so startling that Anthony C. Klotz, and I hope I pronounced his name right, he's a workplace expert for Texas A&M University, and he really coined the term, the Great Resignation. In almost every sector that is tracked by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, workers are quitting at or near the highest levels on record. And the Bureau's stats go back to 2001. So we're talking about a couple of decades. So this has really, really been a major shift for all of us. So when it comes to the long-term care sector, and I know many of you are very aware of what's going on in long-term care, nursing home employment, which had grown steadily in the decade prior to the pandemic, has now plunged more than 380,000 jobs in the past year and a half. And that again is according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So another amazing stat. So Robin Stone, some of you may know Robin. She's a senior vice president of research at Leading Age, co-director of the Leading Age LTSS Center at the UMass at Boston. And they do a lot of work on workforce issues. Robin's a researcher, and they are also still doing a number of studies on COVID, what is happening in the workforce. And she said, COVID has been a game changer, pushing our decade-long workforce discussions to a whole new level of priority. Over the past 18 months, we have learned the hard way how much we need the direct care professionals who provide the bulk of hands-on care in our organizations. And we've also learned, she says, again, the hard way, just how difficult those caregiving jobs can really be. So another study that was done by the American Healthcare Association and also the National Center for Assisted Living. And that happened this past September, and they entitled, "There's the State of the Long-Term Care Industry." And the findings, again, had some pretty amazing numbers. Only 1% of the nursing homes stated that they had adequate staff. And this survey was over probably 1,200 organizations from across the country. So that means 99% of the nursing homes and 96% of the assisted living homes are facing a staffing shortage. And of those, 59% said that there is a high level in terms of that staffing shortage. They also say that 58% of the nursing homes are now limiting new admissions due to the staffing shortage. And 99% of the nursing homes are asking staff to really work overtime, extra shifts, and almost 70% are hiring temporary agency staff. Some real numbers that can really affect your budgets. And while the current demand is there right now for direct care workers, the future will hold even more of a challenge. So Susan had mentioned PHI. They're a national nonprofit organization, and they do a lot of workforce development. They do training, research, and policy analysis. They did a study in September, and it reflected that the direct care workforce will need to add 1.3 million new jobs by 2029 to meet the rapidly growing older population, and more jobs. It is more jobs than any other single occupation. And one other stat, in that same study, they were saying that when you consider filling existing jobs, those folks who are exiting the workforce, transferring to other occupations, there will be a total of 7.4 million job openings in direct care from 2019 to 2029. So pretty amazing. So I'm going to ask Janet if we can go ahead and do another poll. And this one is, I really hope that you will share with us your barriers to recruitment. What are some of the issues? And again, this is one where you can click all that apply. So if you would take a look at, you just don't have the candidates, it's that vaccine, it's, offering the wages, it's COVID itself, the staffing shortage. And if there's something else that's not on this list, again, as Susan said, we would love to get that information to help frame what we may do in the future. So if you could just go ahead and then put that into the chat box. Give you a minute. And then Janet, if you want to, okay, if you want to go ahead and give us the results when we've got a good share of folks doing it. So I see that some people have actually added some things into the chat box, talking a little bit about slow recruitment process means we lose candidates. I can see where that could be an issue, and then those working conditions. So there we go. I was going to go, goodness gracious, I wasn't sure I was going to see the results. Okay, so here are the results. So it looks like lack of interested qualified candidates is really the one that is hitting the most, the 67%, goodness. So, and then it's the wages is next. And I would say it then goes, a little bit of that vaccine requirement. And so there's a couple more comments in the chat box. I so appreciate people adding to it. Oh, just difficult work, lack of empowering staff. Well, we are going to we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Just difficult work. And it's very, I totally understand. And then attracting and retaining registered staff is a challenge. So excellent. I thank you so very much for talking all about that. Pretty daunting stats. So now I'm going to turn it over to Marla, who's going to talk about coaching as a solution.
Thanks, Mary. And yeah, we've heard us say it a couple times that we're not saying that this is the solution. These are multifaceted challenges that require multifaceted solutions, so it certainly is looking at wages, and it's looking at changes in Medicaid and Medicare, and its regulatory changes, and a variety of staffing, of recruitment and retention strategies. But we do believe that coaching is a solution. So I want to just pause for a minute and just talk about, well, what is coaching? There's many different types of coaches and coaching out there. One article I read identified 15 different types of coaches. And so I'll run through just a couple that you're likely familiar with. So first of all, there are sports coaches. And so take, for example, Jim Harbaugh, the coach of the University of Michigan Wolverines, and their defeat of Ohio State in football last week. Just thought I had to throw that in there because I do live in Michigan. There's also, life coaches and health and wellness coaches, career coaches, executive coaches, relationship coaches. In hospitals, there are patient coaches. One of the common denominators with those types of coaches is that they're often external outside consultants who come in to support individuals or teams to identify and then execute their goals. So when we talk about coaching is a solution to the workforce challenges, we're talking about managers and leaders of organizations utilizing coaching approaches to support team members to live out an empowered staff model. And we will certainly get into the greenhouse specific approach a little bit later. So just again, to frame what is coaching, I want to share this quote from Sir John Whitmore, and he is considered to be the pioneer of coaching and leadership development. And he says in his book, Coaching for Performance, coaching is unlocking people's potential to maximize their performance. It's helping them to learn rather than teaching them. And then he goes on to say, coaching focuses on future possibilities, not past mistakes. So we're going to get into this idea that coaching is a growth model. It's growing people in their capacity to problem solve, to make decisions, to resolve conflicts, and to develop their teams. So before we get into our coaching approach, I want to lay the groundwork and share some more stats with you. Mary shared some of the research and stats on the workforce challenges, which are all pretty familiar to you likely. I want to look at some of the research on why we believe coaching is an option. And I'm going to start kind of far afield out in the business world and then come closer and closer in terms of what's going on in long-term care. So on the slide, you see the benefits of coaching, the lessons learned from the business sector. So coaching has been around in the business world for actually a long time. And in many ways, healthcare and particularly long-term care is late to the game. So I'm going to go through a couple different studies from the business sector. So in one study, it was in a US city health agency organization. They had managers who went through a 3-day coaching class. And they found that after that 3-day class, the manager productivity went up by 22%. And then phase 2 of that coaching training was an 8-week, once a week, one-on-one coaching session. And they found that from that productivity went up 88%. In another study of 3,000 bank managers that were trained to be coaches, they saw improvements in, I'm going to list a variety of things: leadership growth, communication within the organization, people's abilities to resolve conflicts. They saw a change in how the managers had a passion or an awareness or the ability to develop others. So they started to look more to how they could do that. They saw a marked improvement in customer service and morale, and they said that this was the beginning of creating that common culture. Other studies that I found highlighted improvements in employee productivity. They described it as the willingness to go the extra mile, greater employee engagement and commitment, an improvement in retention. So 60% of employees who reported to managers who were described as not good coaches were thinking about quitting versus 22 who reported to the best coaches. Studies also talked about improved employee development. They responded with things like, I am given a real opportunity to improve my skills in the company. A couple more, supervisor performance. Employees who received coaching and feedback rated their supervisors more positively. And then in a survey of over 500 companies, 60% of respondents from organizations with strong coaching cultures reported that their revenues were above average compared to their peer group. So really getting at kind of that bottom line. So when it comes to healthcare, there's also some research. I said we're a bit late to the game, but there is some research out there, including a very recent study. There was a published research article entitled "The Influence of Empowered Work Environments on the Psychological Experiences of Nursing Assistants During COVID-19." And it was a qualitative study in a hospital with a small number of nursing assistants. And it concluded that the management and empowerment of nursing assistants was critical to hospital performance and success. It talked about empowering nursing assistants have been shown to improve their job satisfaction, their performance, their morale, and retention. And then it went on to say that to create a team environment to include nursing assistants, to recognize their contributions and to have them feel valued. To allow nursing assistants to innovate and contribute to the decision-making process when new opportunities present themselves in the workplace. And I did see, Kim, your comment in the chat box, and we can certainly, we've got a number of research and research articles that we can share as part of the follow-up work. So then when we get more specific to long-term care, there was a survey of over 3,400 direct care workers, and they were asked the question, what's the single most important thing your employer could do to improve your job as a direct care worker? So, and this is a study that was from 2008, but I'm guessing if it was repeated today, the results would be very similar. So number one was increased staffing. Number two was improving work relationships, especially supervision, and whether workers are appreciated. And it went on to talk about employees feeling listened to and treated with respect, improving relationships through training and communication, supervision, and team building, peer mentoring, and greater involvement of direct care workers in care management decisions. So all of that was lumped together as that number 2, what would be important. And then pay was listed as the 3rd most important change that would make their jobs, would improve their jobs. And those results were for nursing home staff. There was another part of the study that really broke it down then for assisted living. And assisted living, these were still in the top 3, but pay was listed as number 1 for assisted living. All right, I've got a couple more studies to set the stage. So this was a survey of licensed nursing home administrators, and they identified 4 types of leadership styles and then looked at the impact of those styles on employee turnover. So you see on the slide the 4 different leadership types. I'll define the first one and the last one. So the consensus manager, they said, is someone who seeks input from the work group and allows the work group or the team to influence the decision making. So we would say that it's the most empowering of the 4 types of leaders. Then there's the consultative autocrat, and then finally what they described as the shareholder manager. And that's someone who fails to solicit input from the staff on decision making and also neglects to share important information with the staff that would enable them to make better decisions on their own. So here are the results when it comes to turnover. So you see for RNs, LPNs, and nursing assistants, pretty amazing results when you look at turnover, particularly for nursing assistants, from a leader, an administrator operating with one leadership style versus the other. All right, a little more here on setting the stage. In the article, The High Cost of Apathy, Why Leadership Coaching is Needed in Healthcare, and this was an article by Stephen Hayes. He says there's a growing realization that it is the immediate leaders at every level of a healthcare organization who determine results. The most frequently cited reason that employers are energized, work hard, and love their jobs is their immediate leader. More and more healthcare organizations are moving to a focus on leadership coaching to plant seeds of change as the means to drive success in the future and overcome the apathy of the past. And then you see another couple quotes. So Matt Starcevich talks about this in the status of coaching in organizations, where he says the development, growth, and retention of employees and increased effectiveness of leaders is the single most important reason that organizations should undertake coaching initiatives. And finally, in listening to the experts, Mary quoted Robin Stone, and I'm going to quote her as well, but I just want to mention in the November focus of the Greenhouse Project Elevate Elder Care podcast, it was all on the long-term care workforce. And Robert Espinoza, the Vice President of Policy at PHI, outlined the reasons direct care workers are leaving the field. And he outlined 4 main reasons. He said inadequate compensation. He said COVID, and really that it highlighted the danger of the work of being a direct care worker, the general devaluing of the direct care worker role, and poor supervision, and that supervisors are promoted without adequate training and support. And just to add to that, because we learned so much, not only initially from PHI, but we continue to learn so much in terms of understanding the direct care workforce. In the fall of 2020, PHI introduced their framework, the 5 pillars of direct care job quality. And 2 of the 5 pillars, quality, supervision, and support, and respect and recognition, really call out the growth and development of supervisors and the need to empower and engage direct care workers in decision making. And finally, getting to that Robin Stone quote, So on the podcast, she said, we know on the workforce side, the supervisors are the most critical linchpin for the retention of the frontline. And then she went on to call the need for a true learning environment and the empowerment and joint decision-making with the frontline. One more stat to share, and this looks specifically at turnover in nursing homes, and it compares Greenhouse collected data during the pandemic, so during a very challenging time for the workforce, with data from a 2019 study of turnover in traditional nursing homes, so pre-pandemic. And so you can see the difference that an empowered model can make. So now I want to segue. That's a lot of information in a short amount of time, and I appreciate people putting in the chat box. Carol, thank you for putting another great book, First Break All the Rules, that really looks at why people join and leave organizations. So we're going to segue to what is our approach. And I would say our approach is to equip leaders and managers with coaching skills and a coaching approach. And one of the mantras at Greenhouse is that it's all about leadership. In 2020, we received accreditation from the International Authority for Professional Coaching and Mentoring for our Coaching for Supervision class. So that class is for administrators, director of nursing, and kind of the catch-all is all coaching leaders. And we've continued to, since 2007, to really hone and refine our coaching approach. We've integrated coaching concepts into training that every Greenhouse employee receives so that everyone understands what coaching is and what it means to be coached. I think there's a real danger in not equipping direct care team members with an understanding of coaching. And one article I read, they described it as training a line manager as a coach and expecting the team to pick it up as they go is like a tango where only one of the partners knows the steps. So it's really important. We say that there's two sides of coaching. There's coaching and what it means to be a coach. And then there's the coachee, or what it means to be coached. I think it's also important to note that this coaching approach that we're talking about is applicable to any work environment. It's not just in Greenhouse homes. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary, and she is going to dive more deeply into the Greenhouse approach to coaching.
Thanks, Marla. So now we're really going to be getting into the coaching part of things. So I want you to take a look at the statement that will be on the screen next. And I want you to send your thoughts, read the statement, and then send your thoughts to the chat box. And we're really hoping, some of you have already done this very well. So we really want to make this, interactive as much as possible when you do this with a webinar. But we would love to hear what you have to say about that statement. So this is actually how we open up one of our coaching classes. We open it up with this statement: workers don't leave their jobs, they leave their supervisors. And even in the stats that Marla had, it talked about how supervision is such an important kind of piece. And since I teach this section of the class quite often, I can assure you that this statement really resonates with people. And I'm not sure that I've ever taught a class where someone didn't say this was something that really had an effect on why they made a decision to change to a different department, or they literally left an organization because it didn't make any sense. So thank you, Christina, for saying that. I think we always say that relationships really matter. And so when it comes to supervisors, they just play such a very critical role in terms of, really being able to retain those direct care workers, those nurses, those other team members. So I just want to take a look. We had a couple of people who said they totally agreed with the statement. I think that is often true. And when it is not, it is neither a surprise nor a disappointment. And someone with the banking and aviation. So as Marla said, it's across the board, like coaching is really something that's key. And Lori says here that, and when there is an organizational change, there is more internal disorganization. So all important kind of pieces to remember. And this statement, I think, is one of those that can just really, really resonate. So the greenhouse coaching approach is really grounded in the core value of empowered staff. And so we say that we have 3 core values: real home, meaningful life, and the final one is empowered staff. That workforce, that empowered workforce, is only really possible because of the beliefs and behaviors that change at the leadership level. And Marla just said, leadership, it's all about leadership. And that is so very true. That's how we feel at the Greenhouse Project. And so when we talk about empowerment as a function of leadership, it's not that you can just say, oh, poof, people are empowered. It doesn't work that way. That there are really key elements to it, and resources and tools and training that are all part of that in order for that to really, really happen. So you're looking at what our coaching definition is, and it is: coaching is a relational approach of meeting people where they are and helping them to grow in their problem-solving skills without telling them what to do. So that is our definition of coaching. So in our model, we say that supervisors are called to be coaching supervisors. So I'm talking about guides in a greenhouse home to the Shabazim, or the person who is actually that supervisor to the CNAs, or the direct care worker. And then it's administrators to managers. And then it's also like the DON to the nurses. And then all of those who work alongside those folks. So that would be direct care workers, we call them the clinical support team members. So I'm talking about nurses, therapists, social workers, dietitians, the dietary manager, life enrichment. We like to say anyone who touches or feels the greenhouse home, we call to them to be coaching partners. So the supervisors are coaching supervisors. The others that work with each other, we call those to be coaching partners. And so, and some of you have maybe heard this, at Greenhouse, we really believe in growing people. So we say, Greenhouse, 1 word, that's growing plants. But Greenhouse, 2 words, is growing people. That's really, really, really what we are in the business of doing. And coaching, a coaching approach, can really do just that. And I feel like Marla's stats really, really back that up. And so for the Greenhouse Project, we have really woven coaching into all of our education. And at Greenhouse, I believe we are just very strong leaders in coaching, because as Susan started off talking about it, we've been doing it for almost 15 years. So it's really a part of our DNA as an organization. At Greenhouse, we would say that we have, there are 3 different aspects, and we're going to cover all of these in terms of the Greenhouse approach to coaching. And so the first one is a coaching as a skill set. And so this is where you really get those practical, tangible skills that will really help to assist you in developing your coaching skills. And we say there are 4 primary coaching skills, and I'll get into that in a moment. The second aspect is coaching as a mindset. So when you think about that, what are your beliefs about the team, the team members? What behaviors or systems do you feel really need to be in place? And then the third aspect is creating and sustaining a collaborative coaching culture. So what does it take for an organization to really develop and to implement that coaching culture? And I think someone earlier had added something in the chat about when things change at an organization. Very important, because you want to maintain that coaching culture in your organization. When all 3 of these are together, there is like really a very, very special synergy. And so we say you need to have all 3 of these for an organization to really fully implement this. So right now, I'm going to ask you one more time. So in the chat box, when you think about a coach, what do you think really makes a good coach? What are those key ingredients that really need to be part of any good coach? I'll give you a minute to do that. I know that some people will Got a couple of chats in there. True listening. Ooh, Carol Silver Elliott, I totally agree. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Communication, very much so. It's just so important. You have to walk the talk. Very, very, very true. The ability to bond, trust, very key. It's just an empathy. I just think, ooh, nice. Yes, Sandy and Matthew agree on empathy. Attitude of believing in the person, seeing them as creative, wise, and resourceful. Ooh, I think we'll hear those 3 words later on too. Having a high belief in the person. And that is so, so very true. So listening is very foundational. Inspiration and giving the team the inspiration to feel that they can do excellent work. Such a good belief to really have in your team, because that will be contagious. And collaborative involvement of all the team members. Very foundational for the Greenhouse Project in what we believe in. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you all doing that. So let's just take a look, for those of you who are not as familiar, let's take a look at what traditional supervision looks like, and then what a coaching for supervision is all about. So when you look at the graph, the differences between the two. So in that traditional world, you as the supervisor lay out the rules, you explain what's happening, what the consequences are, what that issue is, and then you are the one that is actually offering the solution, the possible solution, and then you make sure that your team members are going to comply with that. The flip side of that is coaching for supervision. Very different approach. So when you do that, as a supervisor, you create a relationship and you clearly present the problem, and then you gather information from your team members or the team itself, depending upon what the issue is that you presented. And then you engage them in problem solving and then help them commit to how it's going to be accomplished. So here's coaching in a nutshell. This will make it very, very clean and simple for you. Here's how you really live this out. Coaching in a nutshell is really the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to ask a question. And then it says here that the shut up, and it doesn't feel good to me. So I'm going to say, and be quiet. So you ask a question and you be quiet. And then you really actually listen to the answer, important. And then you acknowledge that answer. And so on the bottom, it says here, not a fake question, no fake listening, really stop talking. And I think sometimes for people that is very, very hard to do. And then it's really all about developing those critical thinking skills and not by offering any advice, which I think for many of us who have been in that supervisory position or you are currently, I think sometimes people feel that that's what their primary role is, to actually do that. And it's not empowering to team members. And you'll see on the bottom here that Michael Bungay Stanier is the person who is the author of The Advice Trap. Interesting book and some good ideas. So I mentioned earlier that there are 4 primary coaching skills. So for the Greenhouse approach, we have 4. So the first one is active listening, and it's all about your skill set, really of using that good body language, paraphrasing, asking those open, clarifying questions. Effective listening is so essential to coaching. Well, effective listening is really essential in life, but in coaching, it's a very conscious, intentional level. And so you really need to practice those skills. And it's one of those things that, just is not always practiced and not really taught, but so essential. The next block talks about self-management, and that's really being able to set aside your emotional reactions and your judgments. Self-awareness is in the bottom left, and we like to say that self-management and self-awareness are 2 that kind of are almost tied together. And it's really important that you have that you understand really what your emotions, your assumptions are, and your biases, so that you're not prejudging another person, especially in that coaching conversation. And then the final coaching skill is presenting the problem. And I just want you to note that it's not solving the problem. It's called presenting the problem. And so you put it in their court, you don't walk away, but you help them figure out, how to work through and really find a solution to what that problem is. So I just want to talk about one aspect out of this so that you get a little bit more. So asking those all important questions. So when we talk about that, we say this is the mantra. Coaching leaders don't have the answers. They have effective, curious questions. And that's what you need to keep in mind when you're in that coaching conversation. You don't have the answer because you don't have all the information. And what you want to do is gather it and find out more about what's going on. So it's really the bridge between what that person is saying to you because, in light of your questions, and then really what you learn from that and what you want to explore further. So that's how that coaching goes. Some basics of asking open-ended questions, it just really demonstrates your curiosity, your interest in that person, and that perspective, and it helps establish that relationship with that team member or with that team. The person that's being listened to, it really helps them think through more carefully what they're talking about, what their perspective is. And then you as the coach, it helps you more fully understand, what is really going on. And so title of this is The Art of Asking Questions. And we believe that there is an art to that. So many of you are probably familiar with asking open-ended questions. So how, what, why, and that helps elicit a real response from someone versus a closed-ended question where someone could answer with a yes or a no. Well, we also say that there are different types of open-ended questions because you really need to consider different types of questions when you're in a coaching situation. So there are three, and the first one is probing questions. And so probing questions will really help you challenge them to dig deeper. For example, a probing question could be, what was the most significant thing that happened, depending upon whatever that issue is. The second one is expanding questions. And so that's really helping you challenge them to go beyond what they have originally said. It's really to continue to seek more information. So an example of really an expanding question would be, what else led up to the situation? Tell me more about what happened this morning or how that person came or what happened with it. So it gets you more information. Last one is closure questions. And that, of course, is when you get close to the end, while you feel like you have gathered a lot of information. You want to challenge them to really make a choice or an action step to move forward. And so, for example, you might want to say, which option do you believe will help you most in reaching your goal, so that they are thinking about what is that next step? Where do I need to go with that? And I just want to reference the source here, that it's part of the Empowerment Coaching Network. So coaching doesn't, just mean that it's a means to an end to resolve an issue. And it really is there to help that person think more clearly and help them solve that. So the problem needs to be solved, decisions need to be made. The goal of the coach is to develop those critical thinking skills. And when a team member has a voice in the process, they just feel, as I said earlier, much more valued and appreciated in their role. And they will appreciate what you've done as their supervisor. So I'm going to hand it back to Marla, and she's going to take us on to the next coaching skill set, which is that mindset.
Thanks, Mary. And I love all of the comments coming in the chat box. And I want to go back to one that Patty made a comment about the lack of understanding in terms of what I read was kind of the enormous responsibility or the challenge, and that supervisors are kind of being pulled in different directions. And I think just to go back to the PHI findings, which was that people are often put in supervisory roles, often without being given the adequate support and training. And so what we're advocating for is really giving them the time and space to become coaching supervisors for people so that they're really set up for success. So we're going to jump into the next aspect, which is the coaching mindset. And so people have done this already, but I want to encourage you, when you think of, Mary just did a high level overview of the skill set, but now I want you to think about what do you think are the beliefs that a coach needs to have? So whether it's the belief that they need to have about themselves or about other people, take a moment and think about that and type that in the chat box. I saw a couple already. I can go back and find them. There was one about believing in the person, seeing them as creative, wise, and resourceful. I know there was trust. See if I can find others that really speak to the mindset, the belief set, high belief in the person, attitude of believing in the person, having empathy. So I'll see if any others come in. The beliefs you have either about yourself as a coach. So it might be that I believe I can coach. I believe I don't need to have to control everything. It could be a belief about other people that they are resourceful, believing that they're caring, and that people easily lose their caring along the way. High regard for the ability of people, being secure in yourself, so to not get so defensive. So great two sides of believing in people and believing and beliefs you need to have about yourself. Courage to be humble, right? So it takes courage to not be the one that jumps in and solves, but really helps to guide that process. So when we talk about mindset, we're really looking at the belief in the ability of others to problem solve, to be empowered, and to make good decisions. It's about growing people. And as somebody mentioned, what we would say is creative, resourceful, and capable to make good decisions. So Carol Dweck is really the authority on understanding the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And she's done a lot of research, particularly in learning and in schools, but there's a lot of application in terms of our work environment and coaching. So a fixed mindset really assumes that the abilities and understanding of people are relatively fixed, right? So those that have a fixed mindset, they may not believe that intelligence can be enhanced. It's kind of that idea of you either have it or you don't when it comes to ability and talents. A growth mindset, on the other hand, is the understanding that abilities and understanding can be developed. So when Mary said greenhouse, one word grows plants, and greenhouse, two words grows people, you can see that we are much more on that growth mindset. We believe that people have the capacity to grow and improve if we give them the support and the resources they need. And we need to understand that the type of a mindset that we have of ourselves and of others impacts what we do and really impacts the level of empowerment in an organization. So here's we're big on comparisons. So here you see the two columns of how these mindsets get lived out. The fixed mindset, which often leads to a problem solver's or what we'd call a typical manager's mindset, versus a growth mindset, which leads to more of that coaching approach. So Mary mentioned in the coaching skills, self-awareness and self-management. And I really see them as two sides of a coin. And then when it comes to developing a coaching or growth mindset, it's about having self-awareness of my view of the other person. So seeing them as inadequate or unable versus seeing them as what I said, creative, resourceful, and capable. That's my view of the other person. And then one row down, it's looking at my view of what I know. So knowledge, whether I believe I'm the only one that can have the knowledge, or I believe that others have the knowledge. And so then my responsibility or opportunity is to listen for what they know. Going one more row down, it's really looking at how do I view, what's my belief, what's my mindset when it comes to accomplishing a task. There is probably not a lot of dispute about telling people what to do is quicker. In some of our classes, we do role plays and we do a telling approach, and it's, the issue is solved in, I think, under a minute. And then we do it with a coaching approach where there's much more dialogue, there's much more curiosity, and it takes much longer. And we have to acknowledge in long-term care, we're challenged for time. We're busy. We also have to acknowledge that oftentimes that quick fix by the manager or the leader in what they perceive to be the problem might not truly be the problem or the underlying issue. And so the quick fix is destined to have the problem resurface later. And so finally, the last one is having an awareness of my view of how to solve a problem. And I need to shift from a view, my need to fix versus helping others to find their own solutions. One of the primary mindsets for the manager / supervisor is that traditionally we think of help as telling. And we need to shift to think about two other concepts in terms of help, which is really guiding and path clearing. So a guide has a coach has a very active role. It's not about, okay, now the problem solving is in your lap and you walk away. It's a partnership. It's a guided process where you are helping the person to think through things, to think more clearly, to discover the solution. And it's also, I love just that imagery of path clearing. Sometimes we call it barrier busting, but it's helping people to clear things out so that they have the tools and they have the resources to make good decisions. We also say that the greenhouse model is a high accountability model, and it's really about having this mindset of balancing both support and accountability. We use the mantra that is, I believe in you and I believe you can do this job well, which is that support side. Therefore, I'm going to hold you accountable to it. So it's balancing support and accountability. A little bit more on mindset. Coaches need to suspend their need to fix. Mary mentioned Michael Bungay-Stanier and the advice trap. And he's really helped us to expand our understanding between the connection of a skill set and a mindset, and given us a language of this common tendency to fix. So, and it's interesting because he is not a healthcare practitioner. So advice giving and wanting to jump in to solve people's problems isn't unique to long-term care. And it comes from a good place of wanting to, again, help people and to solve problems. But he says that we need to acknowledge that there's an advice monster within each of us. And so we need to have then that self-management and that self-awareness. So a couple of ways that you can do that. First of all, acknowledge your natural tendency to give advice or to fix the problem. And then understand when you give advice, you're in essence telling others that they aren't good enough, that they couldn't possibly come up with the solutions themselves. And we don't say that, and that's not our intention, but I think that's the message that people get. So we're not saying that leaders are never supposed to problem solve or make decisions for people. What we're saying is that far too often as leaders, we have a tendency to take over and solve problems and make decisions. And that with coaching, our empowered workforce could take on much more of that themselves. So the way that you tame your advice monster is instead to use curiosity. Ask more questions and rush to advice more slowly. It's also about, as a coach, focusing on the process, not the outcome, and to remember that you're coaching the person, not the problem. One of the other things with taming your advice monster as part of your mindset is to be aware of advice giving in coaches' clothing. And so when we work with managers and leaders to develop their coaching skill set and mindset, and we do a lot of coaching practice, different role plays, it's common to hear questions that sound open-ended, sound curious, like Mary was talking about, but in reality, they're advice giving with a question mark attached. So it sounds something like, well, how about next time you talk to the dietitian about X? Or how about I call a meeting to discuss this with you and the dietitian? So the how about, that start, right? When you think about open-ended questions, it's that how, what, why. But when you really analyze that as a question, it's really advice giving with a question mark attached, because what I believe is that to solve the problem is that next time you need to talk to the dietitian before you do that, or we need to have a meeting. So I'm inserting my solution rather than guiding the person to come up with their own solutions. So that is the coaching mindset. The third component of the greenhouse coaching approach is creating a coaching culture. And at Greenhouse, we call this creating a collaborative coaching culture, because we like alliteration. And there actually is quite a bit of research on creating a coaching culture. So you see, I'm not going to read through, you'll get these slides, so I'm not going to read through these quotes. They're great quotes. I do want to add one additional one that's here, and it talked about coaching cultures exist when groups of people embrace coaching as a way of making holistic improvements to individuals within their organizations through formal and informal coaching interactions. And it's parallel, if people have been on other webinars or been to other greenhouse classes, it's parallel to what we call our learning framework of beliefs, behaviors, and systems. So when Greenhouse works with organizations that are either building greenhouse homes or desiring to apply the greenhouse philosophy into a traditional environment, we use this model in our process of cultural transformation. And for real change to happen and to make change stick and not just to be seen as the flavor of the month, we need to examine our beliefs, right? What do we believe about things, which we've been talking about with our mindsets? We need to examine behaviors, which is what we do, or the actions that we take, which is what with coaching Mary talked about with the skill sets. And then we need to examine and shift our systems. So the systems is the way that the organization operates. So it can include the policies, the procedures, the practices. It's really how things get done in the organization. And many of you have maybe had that experience. If you only shift beliefs and behaviors, the organization, you might see some change, but then the organization is quickly going to shift back into the old way of doing things. You know, the culture wins every time. So you've got to embed the changes deep into the organization's systems. One of the things that we learned from Thrive Research, which was a research project done on the greenhouse model, is that the greenhouse model gets reinforced or eroded one decision at a time. And I always ask people, well, is that good news or is that bad news? And I really say it's both. It's looking at, it means that every decision matters. And it's also looking at what the research taught us, which is it's how decisions get made is equally important to the decisions themselves. And I think you can take this, while the research was specific to greenhouse, I think you can substitute the greenhouse model for our organization's culture, or a coaching culture gets reinforced or eroded one decision at a time. So culture matters. So before I get into the next slide, which is 6 ways that you can create a collaborative coaching culture, I just want to pause for one more chat question. So we've done a high-level review of the three components of coaching skill set, coaching mindset, and coaching culture. So when you think about moving forward in your organization, if you're part of a larger organization, and not just here for your own personal growth, where would you anticipate the greatest challenge? Is it in equipping people with skill sets? Is it in shifting that mindset and getting away from our advice monster? Or is it in really shifting the culture? What do you see as the biggest challenge? I'll give you a little bit of time to put your answer in. I see 2 for culture. Another one for culture. Culture, mindset, culture. All right. Culture and accountability. Okay, so a lot of agreement that culture is going to be a challenge, right? And it kind of feels like the biggest of the 3. So, and while they're all important, and Patty, your question is good. You don't really separate them. They're very connected, and there's strategies that we can use to help to grow skill set, to help to grow mindset, and then to understand how do we embed it into our system. So here are, and I'm going to go through these quickly, but here are 6 steps for creating a collaborative coaching culture. So first, seed the organization with leaders and managers who can act as role models on coaching approaches. So, as leaders, we say you need to grow first before expecting others to do so. So look at yourself and your leadership team, and how can you equip them to be coaching leaders and to really show, right? Not just tell, but show what coaching looks like. The second one is linking those coaching outcomes to the business. People want to know the why. They want to see the impact, and you need to be able to articulate the return on investment for the business in utilizing a coaching approach. So people want to know, well, why are we doing this? What's the impact? And I think what we outlined in some of the making the case section, there can be some financial gains, can be some of those retention things, also just that level of engagement, people feeling connected, and solving problems correctly the first time rather than having to revisit things. The third step is to create systems. When we talked about beliefs, behaviors, and systems, we said don't neglect the system side of things. That also includes monitoring and measuring the impact. At Greenhouse, about 6 years ago, we created a model fidelity tool to assist organizations in measuring how well the Greenhouse core values get lived out. And part of it's built on our core values, so part of it is on empowered staff. And we look at creating and sustaining a collaborative coaching culture and coaching partnerships. So I'll offer you a couple of the questions that we have as part of that tool. The team feels supported by their supervisor to make decisions within the home. Executive leadership empowers me as a person to make decisions that impact the home and the elders. And one more, there are also questions that really are based on that Thrive research, which looks at how decisions are made or who is making that decisions about daily aspects. So is it more of a kind of top-down decision? Is it more management-led, or is it a coached collaborative? And this is an assessment that's given to some multi-stakeholder assessment. So anybody that works in the organization has a voice in saying, this is really what's happening in terms of coaching and empowerment. All right, a couple more. Equip staff with skills. So at Greenhouse, we say that learning is a process, not an event. And so it means that certainly classroom training needs to happen. You need to equip people with the skills and the mindset shifts, but that needs to be augmented with ongoing opportunities to continue to develop and grow. When it comes to coaching and getting comfortable and having those coaching conversations, the more you do it, the better you get and the more natural it feels for people. Number 5, recognize and reward. So for example, if you have a leader who has formerly been that chief advice giver, and you recognize that they have thwarted that natural tendency to give advice, and they are using more of a coaching approach to guide the team, identify that and praise that, because that's part of their own growth process. And then finally, we have another saying at Greenhouse, which is don't run alone. So seek out others to help support your coaching culture. Look at what networks you can create, what are external resources that you can utilize to develop the coaching skill set, mindset, and coaching culture. So here are some steps for how you can get started. Review the additional resources we're going to send along with the slides and the recording. We'll have a one-page resource, and then we've got, when it comes to skill set, we've got a 9-question listening assessment that you can assess yourself in terms of how good of a listener are you in using those active listening skills. And then we've got a mindset resource, thinking about an issue that maybe you need to present to a team member, a challenge you've been having, and it walks you through, what do you think the solution is? And if you didn't offer that solution, what would be a curious question? So it just helps you to shift that from I know how to solve this to my job is to help ask the right questions. So we will send that resource out, those resources out. Also encourage you to have a conversation at your organization to start to assess what is our current climate for coaching. Where is our coaching at? And then there's an opportunity to attend some follow-up coaching events, and as always, reach out for more support from the Greenhouse Project. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan, who's going to talk more specifically about a couple upcoming coaching events.
Well, thank you, Marla and Mary. This is really tremendous and really some practical ideas. Appreciate the resources that will go out as well. So I hope those of you who attended today really felt equipped with some new things, that you heard some things that would be really helpful to you as you go forward. As Marla mentioned, there are some opportunities that we are putting together, really looking at the first quarter in February to do another one of these types of coaching workshops where we're going to build upon what you heard today. And then second quarter, we'll do another follow-up mini workshop similar to what we did today, building each time along the way. Culminating, we are wanting to, we've been in collaboration with the Pioneer Network, and we are excited that we're going to do a pre-con intensive at the Pioneer Network Conference, which will be in Denver, Colorado, the end of July. So really hoping that you'll take advantage of some of these upcoming events. And you can find out more information on our website. But let's do our poll at the end to just really, it's kind of the post-assessment, if you will. Well, before we do post-assessment, let's hear a little bit from you, kind of future learning opportunities. So this is multiple choice. We'd love to hear from you what you would like to hear a bit more of. So take some time, and this will be really helpful to us as we shape future presentations and opportunities. As we've said many times, coaching is a solution. It's not the only solution, but we believe it has so much to do with shaping the culture and really better jobs, better care. All right. Okay, thanks so much. And Janet, you can take that poll down and put up the next one. And here we go. Post-assessment. So we're just curious to see if it was as helpful as we hoped it might be for you. So just take a few seconds to answer these questions. Now that you've attended, assess your knowledge and understanding of coaching skills, and assess your ability to create a collaborative coaching culture. And we will pay really close attention to some of the chats. We've tried to answer live as we've gone along, but we I've been reading the chats and really, truly, we hear what you're saying and we recognize the challenges that are out there and creating empathy and all the things you're talking about. All right, Janet, you can take that down. And last but not least, I just am going to ask Janet, for those of you that are needing continuing education, she's link the chat box for you to click on that. So you will be able to get the credits that you are interested in getting. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, thank you, Marla, for sharing your expertise, for sharing more about the Greenhouse Project's approach and some of the things that we do to support organizations to really have that culture that will really be there to support the workforce. So thank you everyone for your time today. I know your time is, I wish all of you a blessed holiday season and we look forward to engaging with you more here. So take care everyone.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Janet, I don't know if you're listening. Can you put the link in one more time?